Okay, so the recording has started, so I'm going to get started. So I'm going to sort of use a deck to go through this content just so that there is some context. And as we go through it, you'll also realize where are the three interventions where I need your feedback just to show more live data. So let me just open the deck. Okay, are you able to see the deck?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, awesome. So today will be basically an introduction, and we'll also talk about what we have in the works for the future. And this is really, as I said, really the first time that I'm doing a live session. And the idea with more such sessions over the next 2 months is to get feedback on the framework itself as we roll it out in the next quarter to a much wider set of people. So the agenda. First up, first 20 minutes I'll try and cover because a bunch of you might know me, but a bunch of you might not know me. So I'll take 3-4 minutes to give some context on all the things that have happened in my life. The second is the 9 tenets sort of act as the core of this entire One Life Theory framework. The third is 4+1 ways to live life. So the way the 9 tenets branch into actually what the 7-step framework is, the connect is actually the ways to live life. And I'll, as any consultant, I'm not a consultant, but as any consultant is known to do, I will also do a 2x2. Uh, right at that juncture, I will also do a 5-minute poll just to understand where each of you. And the idea with all of this is more to show trend lines rather than to actually ask any specific individual amongst you where you are. So I will do sort of a quick 5-minute poll right at the end of session one. The next 20 minutes in session two will basically go deeper into actually elaborating the 7 steps. I am spending more time on the first 4 steps, which sort of act as the core of it. The last 3 steps, I'm sort of really breezing through, also because of lack of time. The idea with that is at the end of step four, I also do a 5-minute poll and understand and measure your happiness index. You can again share because it is quite anonymous, and the idea is to understand patterns of where people are. The last 10 minutes, and as I promised, we are at 4:10. We will close 5 minutes ahead of time. So for the next 45 minutes, basically each of this will probably be 15 to 20 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes in the last 5 to 10 minutes in the third session. Please keep the questions coming as I cover a particular material. Please keep your questions or your comments coming. I also will do a feedback form sort of formally at the end of it, because all of the feedback that you're giving will go into making this better in the next session and the forthcoming sessions, as well as all the different stuff that we will be doing. I can see some massive usage of Zoom. Thanks, Saurabh. Okay, I'm going to move on and let me get to my own background. Right, I think the important part of covering this, it might sound like a bit of a humble brag, but the idea is to also be able to relate to most of you. Born in 1978, over 4 decades, have done pretty much a lot of different things. For the first 10 to 20 years of my life was extremely simple life. Quite a nerd. Started coding in probably 8th, 9th grade. At that time, that was pretty early actually. And pretty much loved computers. And along with that love for computers came everything that you would associate with a nerd, quite introverted and very stereotypical for a Chennai lower middle class boy. Went to IIT Madras and learned more on computers. Went to Infosys, went to Cognizant, did my MBA. This was sort of it was almost like a clear pattern that IIT plus IIM has to be stamped on my resume. Did that until I think I would say around 30. I had a reasonably standard career in life. Got married, had a kid. I think right around the age of 30 is when I started deviating from the norm. So the first thing there is not the divorce, but more the starting up, right? And starting up a decade back was not as popular. So right after a bunch of corporate careers, started up Urban Ladder in 2012, exactly 10 years to the almost to the month, and raised a lot of venture capital and built a D2C brand when all of this was not so popular. And I think through that experience, through those ups and downs, also in personal life, I got divorced in 2016. And I think somewhere in that, uh, pretty much the mathematical definition of midlife, which is if you're going to live up to 80, your mathematical definition of midlife is between 38 and 42. I think I went through my own midlife. And somewhere around that time is when I swung pretty much from one extreme to another, which is I did everything that I had not done in life before, which is I partied, I traveled a lot more, I started dating, I also, started and managed to find love again, and also moved to what people call the darker side from a founder to a venture capitalist, right? And I know a bunch of you here are working in venture capital, but pretty much moved a lot of aspects of my life. And that's where you see a very nice introverted boy moving to this jack of all trades, completely extroverted, and quite a different personality that way. I think this particular aspect of my life, which is my weekend life, a lot of the time that I spend on One Life Theory is actually to spread whatever I have gained as experiences going through so many ups and downs across both my corporate, professional, as well as my personal life. So the idea with all of this is more a very personal story, and as I am far more left brain, I think I put a framework to everything, and you'll see the result of that putting a framework in the rest of the slides. So that's a quick background of mine to say that very stereotypical conservative backgrounds, but did a variety of stuff across professional personal life. It also, I think, is important for people before they start talking about experiences to go through both ups and downs. Because if you only have ups, I think it's very difficult to see the other side. And that's something that, fortunately or unfortunately, I've gone through pretty much in all aspects of life. And that is one of the reasons I think it gives me more credibility to actually do something like One Life. Let me move to the next section, which is my own inspirations. This is not a framework that I one fine night woke up and put together. I think there have been inspirations from a variety of stuff. You may or may not relate to individuals that are put here. You may or may not like some of these folks here. But for me personally, I think there is a lot to gain from each of these. That's Naval Ravikant, Sadhguru, that's Marcus Aurelius, and this entire Stoic philosophy. That's someone as new as Jay Shetty, that's a book of scriptures like Bhagavad Gita. I think there's just a lot to learn, and I probably have covered 1 to 2% of each of this, right? The idea is that you can have inspiration and you can derive philosophy from any of these different sources, whatever you relate to the most. And for me personally, while all of these have their own faults, I think I look at what are the positive side on the learnings from each of this. That this list can never be fully talked because it's such a big list, but I would say these are 7 or 8 of the most prominent ones. Let me start with the first core of a lot of what I will be talking about in the actual framework itself, and that's what I call the 9 tenets. In the podcast version, there were 10 tenets. I think with time, what I have done is a version 3 of this is thinned down to 9 tenets. I'm going to go through this, and if you have any queries specifically on these 9 tenets, or if you vehemently, refuse to believe any of this or have a completely counter point of view, please go ahead and post it on the chat window. I would love to hear your point of view on this. So let's spend the next 3 4 minutes covering these 9 tenets. I'm going to go through a bunch of this quickly because a lot of this is also on the blog and the podcast. But the idea is to sort of set the foundation to the 7 step framework itself. So tenet number 1, the universe is infinite, and I don't think I need to say this, but we are such a small thing. As much as our ego thinks makes us think that we are this big thing, if you travel anywhere outside India, you are made to feel small, right? You are a nothing in that new country. But that's just one way. If you also think that you might be, the founder of a unicorn, you might be the richest person in this country, you might be the prime minister of this country, or it could be anyone or anything, but you are actually, pretty nothing in the grand scheme of the universe. No one today knows or talks about the Mayas or the Incas. These were folks that before 2000 years ruled the entire, such a big piece of land. It's the same, I think as much as all of us might think of the biggest companies or the biggest business leaders of the last 10 years, I don't think any of us remembers too many of the business leaders from 30, 40 years back. So you could go build a great company, you could go do something phenomenal, but time and life is quite short. And in the grand scheme of things, you're still a nobody for this universe. So the universe is infinite. And if you ever thought that this is the only thing or this is the only option, I think you're just fooling yourself. In terms of time, in terms of space, in terms of people, in terms of relationships, in terms of jobs, in terms of any singular aspect that you pick, the universe is infinite. And that's sort of the first defining aspect of the nine tenets. However, your life is finite. Your life is all of 80 years or probably lesser. So it is your duty, your job to really live it up. The reason why you should live it up is you're going to die. There is nothing that's going to stop it. As much as a lot of science can try and extend your life from 80 to 100 years, and maybe at some future point in time, immortality and time travel, I don't know today. But as of today and as of the next 10, 20 years, your life is going to be finite. And there is just absolutely no point of wasting that finite life you're going to have. So living it up across all aspects of life is critical because it is, and I'll talk through the four aspects and the five ways to live life. But typically, almost all of us will have some time that we spend in each of these four broad aspects of life. Pretty much anything and everything that you do can be clubbed into one of these four aspects. And it just makes sense to live a completely full life across all of these four aspects. When you're living up life, what is really living it up? Living it up is really the present moment because there is nothing you or me or anyone for that matter can do about the past. You could have had a great past, but it is about right now because you can't live just in nostalgia. That is wasting your life. It is the same. You can have great dreams and you can have great potential, but you can't live on potential. You can't live on the future. Something like a COVID can come and completely change people's lives when you have absolutely no clue, right? No one predicted COVID. No one predicted all the changes that happened with COVID. So if you think that you can predict the future, you're just fooling yourself, which essentially means only one thing: the current moment that you own, the current moment where I'm talking to all of you, the current moment right after this, that what you will be doing is the only truth, right? You could have been someone phenomenal in the last 40 years or 30 years of your life. All that is nothing. And that is something that's important. Even a Shah Rukh Khan has to, I mean, he might have the financial freedom today to experiment more, but he's also measured on his latest hit. A political leader is measured on their latest, government. The cricketer is measured on his latest match. So I think it's extremely important to understand that you, irrespective of what you're going to be doing, is about what you're doing currently. If the present moment is all that you have, you would rather love what you're doing in the present moment. The reason why you should love it is it's very easy to love things which are pretty easy. If you're going to be traveling in the moment, you would love it. If you're going to have something which is your favorite food, you'll love it. You're going to watch your favorite movie, you will love it. Maybe you love what you do at work and you would love it. But there are things that you might not love: exercise, waking up early, meditating, just going through traffic, picking up your kid from school, s- getting the kid to study better, study more. Uh, just anything that doesn't fall into your pleasure zones seems like a lot of work. But if you actually fundamentally love that particular aspect and not resist, you pretty much will love every single moment. And this is easier said than done, because to move something from pain to pleasure is what love is, right? If it's already pleasure, it's very easy to love it. If it is pain, you have to actually move it to pleasure. And that entire process and how you do it pretty much defines how consistent you are in things that you don't like default. Any work that you do, anything that you build, any purpose that you achieve, there will always be pieces of it which you don't love by default. And the only way that you can actually enjoy that moment is to make sure that with effort, with consistency, with intent, you actually love that present moment. What happens with love is both success and failure is imminent, because if you love something and if you do something with passion, don't expect that for always it's going to be successful or it's going to only have ups, because you can't predict what the market is, you can't predict what the other person thinks, you can't predict how it is taken by someone else, because you're doing it with full passion, with full intent. So be ready to have both ups and downs, and that is just the inherent nature of life. In session 2, I've actually be measuring your happiness index, and that's a very deliberate ploy. That doesn't mean that life, the actual 7-step framework talks about both happiness and sadness. It talks about elation and frustration, and it is inherent truth to life that you have both of it in life. Now when you're as a body, as a mind dealing with all of these ups and downs, are you really able to handle it? Fortunately, unfortunately, everyone's mind is actually capable of handling it. Now, some people are genetically born to be able to handle it with no help. Some people, most people need some kind of help through it because you're going to be taking on challenges which you have never handled before, whether that's professionally, whether that's personally, whether that's on the relationship front. And in some cases, the mind is also broken beyond just natural help, help that just a regular person cannot give you, where you might have to actually also be on medication. But irrespective of what status it is, the mind is capable of handling all of this with equanimity. Equanimity does not mean that you don't handle the ups and downs or you just don't react to it. In fact, it is the opposite. You actually celebrate the ups, you learn from the downs, and you make sure that you do the next time better. And that's what equanimity is, right? So you do live it with full passion, and make sure that you live for that particular moment and are able to handle the ups and downs that come with the love that you give that particular moment. When the mind is so capable, what should the mind do? There is only one theory scientifically which is so inherently true. And well, if you don't believe it, power to you. But really, evolution, and the theory that was put forth by Charles Darwin just talks about survival of the fittest and really moving forward. If you're not moving forward and if you're static, you're going to die. This is true of life. If this is true of work, this is true of relationship. If you take anything for granted, that's health. If you think that it will continue, it will never. Which essentially means that every single day of your life, you have to put consistent effort to move something ahead. Otherwise, you're going to go back on it, right? And this is the unfortunate reality. It would have been so much easy that once you hit a 85 kg on your weighing machine, that it will always be 85. It never is. You have to put that effort the next day. You have some great love, as I have found, and the person is on this call. It's not that that love is going to continue for the next 5, 10 years just by me being the same, right? I have to put that effort, and she has to put that effort to make sure that that love continues. It is the same at my day job, Antler. I have to make sure that I put in that effort. I put in consistent effort to get the best founder and really give the returns to our investors. It is the same on one life theory, and the one thing that I've missed is the last 18 months I've not really put any effort on this, and there's so much potential on this. So I have to make sure that I do that every week to move this ahead. Moving forward is the only duty that we have as humans. As long as we are moving forward and moving ahead on ideally all aspects of life, we are doing our duty. Beyond that, there is really no specific duty. It could be a small step that you do, it could be a big thing that you do, but moving ahead and moving forward is the only real duty for humans. The moving forward, moving ahead in itself is also a story. And the moment you understand that purpose is a story, you have a lot of clarity. Whatever I have told you till now is a story, right? But this is not the only story. Star Wars, which, the last, if you see the last slide, Darth Vader is modeled on, is really a story that a billion people believe. When I say believe, they actually are fan followings. They see the movies, they buy merchandise. Any rational human being can never do something as silly as that, but we all do it, right? Because we believe in stories. The single biggest power of human beings compared to any other animals before in the evolutionary cycle is actually the power to tell stories and power to congregate by telling stories. But those are not the only stories. Pretty much everything that we live by is a story. The institution of marriage, the institution of a corporation, the institution of even a family, the institution of religion, the institution of country, state, every single one of it is a story. Today, you see Russia fighting a war based on a story that a leader of that country is telling lots of millions of people there. And, that's so unfortunate because you're killing people on the pretext of making sure that your country is safe. And that's a whole lot of bullshit, right? Humans can tell stories to make people move forward. People can tell stories to cause destruction. It is all in pure intent to make sure that the stories that you say are actually something that's truthful and something that moves the human race ahead. Last but not the least, make sure that when you tell your story, you don't judge someone else's story. It is very easy for us to judge someone else's story, specifically, if they do not fall within the same things that we ascribe to. That could be our caste, our religion, our sex, or it could be something as simple as our college, our workplace, our city, our country, the color of someone, and so many other ways in which we have implicit biases that set in. If you want to really move this human race ahead, just make sure that you live your story and do not judge anyone else's story, as long as that does not cause destruction or harm to anyone else. I will pause here and use a Confucius quote because these are the nine tenets on which a lot of this framework is built fundamentally. You will see how this sort of pans out into the seven step framework. For me, one of the very specific quotes that really altered my life when I was going through my own midlife crisis between 38 and 42 is this quote, which is: we all have two lives, and the second one starts when we realize we only have one. For me, that second life really started, and the reason why this actual framework is named one life theory is also based on this specific quote, right? It is actually just a life. It's one life we have. It's just that the moment you realize it is really when it starts, and that's the reason why I've named it one life. The last part of this section is the five ways to live life. This is important, and this is where I sort of unleashed my first two by two. So bear with me. I think it's extremely easy to plot where you will live life or where you're living life currently across one of these five axes. And I'm going to talk through each, right? The axis first. On one axis, which is the right hand direction, is all pleasures. Pleasures could mean travel, pleasures could mean fun, pleasures could mean money, pleasures could mean food, pleasures could mean sex, pleasures could mean anything, which could be experiences or material pleasures. Purpose is, on the other hand, something around legacy, something around creating something of impact. Purpose could be something where you're creating an institution, you're impacting people, you're spreading something which is good and moving the human race forward. Now, all of what we do can be plotted across these two axes. I have given these names doesn't mean that these are names more for giving, each of these landing points some ease to be remembered. That doesn't mean that monks don't live a life of purpose or don't have pleasure. It is just that a monk life means that you're literally devoid of any purpose or pleasure. When you're devoid of any purpose or pleasure, you're living an extremely simplistic life, and making sure that whatever you're living every day, you're taking care of living at peace. You have no pursuit of pleasure, you have no desires. You also don't have any specific initiative by which maybe you serve your local population, but you are not building any institution. You're not really trying to prove, some kind of a legacy. So that's what I call monk life, and that's you know point number one in terms of ways of living life. If you move on the right hand axis, where you're living a life of pleasure, and this could be, a very nomadic kind of pleasure where you're just experiencing, traveling the world, making sure that you're experiencing different aspects. Or it could be a very material life where you have a lot of money. You don't want to work somewhere, but you're just going to be spending time and you're traveling the world, and because you have money, right? That's what I call a bohemian life. I haven't used the word nomadic only because bohemian is probably a better way to say that it's a bit more of a luxurious life. It could be experiences or material pleasures. On the polar opposite end of the spectrum is the missionary life. This is where all of what you're doing is towards building an institution that moves ahead. A lot of startup founders fall in this aspect of life. They don't care as much for pleasures. They spend pretty much all of their time on this. You don't have to be a Mother Teresa to be in this missionary life. You could be even a capitalistic person building an institution, but you're building it for impact. You're not just building it for power. I would love to put government officials here, but they don't live here, because a lot of them are more for the pleasures of power. And missionary life is really where you're dedicating your life to creating something which moves the human race forward in some form or the other. There is something in between here which I've called centered life. The podcast doesn't actually specifically talk about centered life, but I've added that as a fourth aspect. There are two ways in which you can live the centered life. One is by design. You're living with contentment. You like yourself in terms of both what you do at work as well as how you spend time with your relationships, as well as how you have fun, as well as how you maintain your health. You are centered because you're content. By choice, you're living in that center. You don't have great massive ambitions on any of these aspects. You want to live a very simplistic life. This is almost like a lot of people who are happy, are consciously happy. But there is another which trend which we have seen, specifically the youngsters who are living this centered life but are extremely unhappy. They are unhappy because they want to move to one of these four extremes. They are there because by default. They have not moved to any of those four extremes. And they want to really break away, break free, but they are not able to do because they've either not cracked the right job, or they don't have the ability to make that first step or travel the world or whatever it is, right? So they are stuck here. Now, whether if you're going to be answering four in the next question, it would be interesting to hear from all those that answer four whether it is by design or it is by default that you live on four. The fifth way, which is what one life theory is about, and this is just one framework by which you can live on the extreme. There are many other ways in which also you could live on this extreme, is what we call one life, and one life theory is a framework by which you can live your one life, right? Which is really maximizing all aspects of life. That could be pleasures, that could be purpose. And that is what this particular framework is. So I want to do a short poll. Uh, so the idea of the one life theory framework is really you could be on any of these three axes. You could be living a bohemian life, or you could be living a centered life, or you could be living a missionary life. What is the way in which you can move more and more towards living a completely full life? Because if you're only working, is that a way you can enjoy life? If you're only enjoying life, is that a way that you could actually do something which is substantial? If you're here, but not by contentment, but more by default, is there a way that you can push to this extreme? And that is really the purpose of the One Life Theory framework. I will try and answer the questions in a short break. Our vision for One Life Theory as an organization for Tara and me is to help 1 billion people live their one life. For me, it is a weekend hobby. For Tara, it's her daytime job in addition to her writing and her poetry and her art. We also have a value system that we are trying to live by for One Life Theory itself, which is to make it fun, to make it more authentic, to be real, to make sure that we help people change even in some small minute aspect, and to make sure that we actually give you the tools and empower you to be able to do that at your own pace and at your own time, right? This is sort of the longer term vision. In the last, I'll talk through a slide where what sort of the vision for this as an entity is. Poll time. I'm going to paste it on the chat, the link to the poll. I would love for you, just two questions. I would love for you to take it. I'm going to only put the patterns here. And sorry, actually, this is not the link. Sorry, use the second link. 1 second. Just tell me if the second link works. Yeah. Two minutes. So very practical reference framework. Thanks, Prashant. Use this template to reflect on self. Thank you. How does one do the balance act centered life? Large majority of us fall here. It's a constant pull to get to one side of the 2x2. FOMO on four centered life is real always. I will actually talk about this lesser today, but I will make a mention of it in step 5 on this, making sure that you do the balancing act. I will talk about it for 2 minutes. I don't see any other questions till now. Where you are in the 5 days is also a function of where you are in the time and space, isn't it? Both worked. Okay. Okay, let me see if there is enough patterns to project. Okay, we have 14 responses, so it's exactly the patterns that I would want to project, so it's good. I was worried whether the answers here could be something that I project. Okay, live poll responses. A lot of you have said that you are in centered life, right? And it's this is exactly as I predicted, that I had predicted close to 80%, and it's close to 2/3, that you would be in centered life. A lot of you, and as I predicted, zero would be in monk life. You would not be attending this session if you were in monk life. And as I also predicted, zero want to get to monk life because you have one life. And, at some point in time, and the funny part is, after all of life, all of us would realize that monk life is the end state. And you would want to transition to monk life at the end where you sort of leave everything, but that's for much later in life. Someone is living the bohemian life, and I think that's great. Good for you. I am actually surprised that more people haven't said they want to live the bohemian life. It's still only one. Bohemian life is something that's becoming very popular in terms of experiencing a lot of different aspects of life and doing things which are just about enough, right? The missionary life is somewhere in between, which is around 15% in both up, where you are right now as well as where you want to be. As I expected, a lot of people who are in the centered life want to move to one life, right? And that's sort of really the purpose of this. You not by default, not even by contentment, and it is absolutely fair that you live in the centered life by contentment of these 10 people, whoever, or these 11 people, whoever is there by choice. I think the message there is, if there is a choice for you to sort of move towards one life, why would you not do that, right? Try to be a Hrithik Roshan in your health. Try to be a Shah Rukh Khan in your commitment to work. And I think the idea is to sort of live a full life across multiple aspects. So thanks so much for responding to this. That'll help. So let me just now move back to the presentation. Okay, 35 minutes passed, so 23 minutes left. Let me try and get to the next sections faster. Okay, so we covered session one. Session two is about the framework itself, right? Which is what's the 7-step framework. And as I said, I'm going to talk more in detail on the first 4 steps. Not so much in detail today in steps 5, 6, and 7. I'll just make a passing mention of it, specifically covering the time aspect of things, but I'll tell you where it will land, right? So, step number 1. This is different from what I had mentioned in the podcast, where I had talked about patterns of the past. Uh, I actually have personally built the first way to actually assess and analyze this. All the people here from Antler would know that I've already rolled this out to Antler as sort of the first experiment in a way. The idea with this is you as a person fall in one of these 4 personality types. Now, this is resembles MBTI, the Myers-Briggs, but this is not the MBTI framework. This is more foundational. This is the original Carl Jung framework on personality assessment. Out of all the different personality assessments, there is one by Jordan Peterson also. There's a bunch of others also. There's something on the Strengths Finder. There are a few other frameworks. I have found this to be the most useful to assess someone both personally and professionally as to their different behaviors and their aspects. And again, for want of time, not going to go into, I can have a 3-4 hour session just purely on this. I can do an assessment just purely on this. But the idea is you as a person typically have one dominant personality and one secondary personality, which means you'll probably have one dominant column here and one secondary column here. Typically, the third and the fourth columns don't have too much of an overlap. You will either be an intuitor or a sensor. Thinker and feeler can go with any of the two. You could be an intuitor thinker or you could be an intuitor feeler. There is enough and more of this. Same with sensor feeler, sensor thinker. There are certain differences in gender here based on a past research that I've done on Instagram for around 100 responses. There were clear differences in gender responses. There was more affinity for certain genders to be a particular type, and this is because of evolutionary reasons as well as a lot of historical reasons. The thing with these personality types is you have different prominent ways in which you act. There is no one personality which is better or worse. Every human being here actually has different character attributes which get into all of these 4 different personality traits. But the idea with this prominent personality is, what is your ideal kind of a relationship partner? Who is your ideal co-founder in a startup? Who is your ideal boss? Who is the ideal person who will report to you? How will you engage or interact with maybe friendships? A lot of things can be predicted based on your personality type. And there's a humongous amount of intelligence that can be gathered based on your personality type. There are certain advanced tests. I actually haven't come across any, but there are certain tests, and actually we are building a test for the One Life Theory framework to be able to assess you on this personality type. More on this later. The understanding of this personality type gives a lot of intelligence into the further steps of this process. So that's the first step, understanding your personality types and patterns from the past. The second step is what I call regret minimization. Now, where you are in life, you probably have some regrets already that you have built up, right? Which is, I have not done this yet. I'm turning 30, I'm turning 40, I'm yet not done this, right? Before you jot down your own top 3 regrets, for example, you don't want to die before doing your own startup. I've heard this a lot from potential founders or founders, right? I want to start up some point in time, or I want to travel the world. Or maybe for some it's to have a kid or spend time with their kid. They will feel guilty or they will not want to take that to, with them to the grave. Whatever it is for you, it could be something quote unquote trivial, it could be something quote unquote, it could be something like climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. I don't even know, right? Whatever it is, your top three, whether it's strategic, whether it's trivial, whether it's personal, whether it's professional, you should list what your top three, five that you do not want to carry to your grave. A lot of people postpone those regrets to much later in their life, forgetting that life only gets worse with dependencies. Of course, you get more financial freedom, but when you grow older, there's a lot more dependencies, and the moment you get into your rat race, your income and your money just keeps pace with your spending lifestyle, right? So the idea is that if there's any of those regrets that you can take up way earlier, you should. But more importantly, there's also a lot of literature here, because unfortunately you're not dying, so you don't know what you're going to feel on your deathbed. There is a lot of intelligence on this, and I would go with the data. So there is this research which was done by a nurse who has seen thousands of people who on their deathbed, and this is actually in order. What she said, right? First, the biggest regret for people when they were dying: I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not what others expected of me, right? Which is unfortunate, because a lot of people live the regular life based on what others expect of them. Look at the second one. And this is so funny, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. So all the people who spend, and it is fair that when you are a missionary, you probably don't care about this. If you're if work is your thing, it is fair that you don't care about point two. You feel that you will never have that regret. But unfortunately, even some of those that didn't have that regret early on, clearly after many years realize this, right? That doesn't mean that you don't spend a lot of time on work. It just means that you don't spend all of your time at work. The third is, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. This is probably for all those people who never expressed their romantic desires to their loved ones and ended up maybe marrying or have a relationship or continued on without breaking apart. The fourth one is, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. And the fifth one is, I wish I had let myself be happier. And the way I read five is, I wish I had let myself not be so stressed, right? Now, the good part with all of this is you have this research, and if you are able to personally relate to any of this and or not relate to any of this, assume that today you don't know enough about what you would actually feel when you are going to be dying. And this is research that you could actually go with. Again, it doesn't mean that you fundamentally have to change something, but I think it is important that you have some level of consciousness of what this data is. The moment you capture what your three biggest regrets are, so if you see step 1, 2, 3, it is all about the past, right? Which is, what are your patterns, what are your past regrets or regrets as of today, and what really is your true potential as of what you have done till now. So this has five subsequent questions, and the idea with this is to really understand your ikigai circle, which is a pretty famous concept, as well as what are the things that you really value and what are the things that are stopping you from really achieving your potential. Because until you understand your own gaps, until you have the self-awareness to poke holes into why you have not reached what your potential is, you're fooling yourself. So the fifth question amongst these in step 3 is actually to understand what your gaps are. The first four are what you're good at, what you have been successful at. Questions 1 and 2 can have very varying different answers. This is across professional and personal lives. It's not just your professional life. What would you be like to be mentioned in your eulogy, right? Whether that's you want to be called a nice guy, you want to be called a great parent, you want to be called a great spouse, you want to be called a coach, you want to be called someone who created a legacy, who impacted millions, whatever it is for you, you want to be called just a genuinely honest human being, or you want to be called something else, whatever it is, it would be fantastic for you to mention this. Who are your role models? Who are the people that you look up to? Because that also catches, right? You say things which are nice here, but on 4 you put all Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, blah blah blah. Then you're not being true to what your answers are, either in questions 1 to 3 or in question 4, right? So the idea with this is to come at it from different angles and really understand what are the things you value, what are the things you are good at, and what are your gaps. Step 4 is the most critical step in the entire 7-step framework. It is to understand your 100.1 life score. The idea with the 100.1 life score is it measures how full you're living your life across all of these different aspects. And I'm going to quickly touch upon each of this. This has four core aspects, just to make it easier for you to remember, what I called health, work, relationships, and fun. I have named them all with four S's. So that's self, service, social, and senses. If you look at it, there are three under each of this. Self is broken down into mind, soul, and body. Service is broken down into skills, career, and wealth. Social is broken down into romance, parenting, friends, and family. And senses is broken down into lifestyle, media, and travel. If you look at these, they are further broken down into two in some cases. The first eight are further broken down into two, and point 9, 10, 11, 12 don't have two. They just are that only, right? So the idea with these 12 is basically you have 20 sub aspects, 12 sub aspects, and 20 pointers around which. So, for example, that's mind strength and mind sharpness. So, about the soul, it's the goodness of the soul as well as how peaceful it is. With respect to the body, how well are you the internal aspects of your body? How well are you on the external aspects of the body? Because both are important. In terms of skills, what are your behavioral skills? What are your functional skills? In terms of career, what are you doing right now? Is it impactful? And are you growing fast in your career? In terms of wealth, you might be earning great income, but do you have investments and wealth from the past? Or is it just a very high income? Or vice versa? In terms of social, do you have romantic compatibility as well as are you enjoying your companionship? In terms of parenting, are you a good kid to your parents? As well as the moment you have your own kid or you're the parent of a pet, are you a good enough parent to your kid? Are you a good social connector to your friends and family? Do you have a great local life in terms of where you live, where you work, and making sure that you have a good social life there? Are you on top of all the media, whether that's your favorite sports, movies, music, TV? And the last bit is, are you well traveled and do you understand diverse cultures? This makes the entire human experience full, and the logo of One Life Theory actually comes from these four aspects. Green stands for self, blue stands for service, red stands for social, and yellow stands for senses. The idea with the logo is that you're always reaching out, right? You're literally on that four axis, you're moving up, further and further away. For example, if something is broken, right, you could, and we actually have a 100-point score. All of this is actually broken down to 100 micro points on which you can actually be graded, and you have a score on 100 point. We're not going to do that today because of lack of time, of course, but you actually have a 100-point score that we have come up with, and that's something that we will operationalize sometime in Q2. The idea with the score is you could fall in any aspect. You could be greater than 80, which means that you're probably acing it on multiple aspects of life. You could be 60 to 80, where you probably are acing it on three aspects and you probably are not good on one. You could be 40 to 60, where you probably have two aspects of life where you're not doing well. And if it's less than 40, it's almost like a fail mark. The score is not relative to anyone else. The score is an absolute score. It is how well you are doing in life. It is also, there is a weighted score here, because in any one, and this sort of goes back to the question that someone had asked. It is not that every day of your life or every week of your life or every chapter of your life, all four are equally important. That's not the purpose. That's not the case. You can actually single out that one of this is the most important aspect. For example, if you're running something, if you're doing a critical, for a lot of us who are pursuing something important in careers, who are extending towards the outer bound on both purpose and pleasures, a good chance that service is the biggest anchor, specifically in the key working years of 20 to 50, which essentially means that you're going to be weighing service a lot more than the others. Okay. A typically balanced life, if you have 168 hours in your life every week, all of us have 168 hours, 48 hours go into your chores and your sleep. All of us have 120 hours, and you should park out 20 hours of your week on self, right? Which is meditation, body, making sure that your body and mind are kept well enough. That means that the 100 hours are left every week. There's a TEDx talk that I've done on this 100-hour work week, 100-hour week. How you divide the 100 hours across senses, social, and service is really what it is, right? Someone who's doing something very basic at work, that number is 40. Someone who's doing something phenomenal at work, that number is between 60 and 70, right? These are the two extremes on which you operate in the One Life Theory framework, because Even if you're retired, if you're beyond 50 or 60, you should still keep your mind sharp and you should still keep doing 30 hours of work. If you're in your 20s to 40, 50 and service is not where you want to anchor, but you want to anchor on social and senses, and that's fair, that's a choice you make, right? Then I would say maybe you spend 40 hours on service and 60 hours across senses and social. If you want to anchor around service, especially if you're doing, if you're running a venture capital firm, or if you're doing something, where you're running a firm, you should spend 60 to 65 hours, two-thirds of that 100 hours on service, and probably one-third across this. And those are the kind of choices that we make, right? Maybe when you're on vacation, you spend lesser time on service, but outside of that, pretty much on all regular weeks, you spend far more time on service. And that's how these four aspects actually help you figure out how you and where you spend time. I'm going to take a pause here because I would love to understand where the happiness index. So I'm not doing a poll on the one life score because that would have taken far more time. I'm going to do a poll on just your happiness index, which is not a score on a scale of 100. This is a score on a scale of 10. You would rate yourself 9 or 10 if you're extremely happy. You would rate yourself 7 or 8 if you're moderately happy, and you would rate yourself 6 or lesser if you're not so happy, right? I would love to understand where you are, and I will paste the URL. I would love to see the trend of the 20 people here. Maybe spend 20, 30 living a bohemian. Yeah, would love for your answers while I just go through the queries till now from Mojasvi and Abhishek. Yes, 22. Absolutely. I think Ojasvi, you hit a very important point which I didn't cover. I'll talk about it. Can be on different quarters based on a stage of life. Before indicate bohemian for. So I think both of you are saying, the same thing, which I do agree. I think it's easier to be in your 20s to 30s in the bohemian, in your 30s to 50s in your one life or missionary, and beyond your and maybe you can keep alternating. You could be beyond your 60s in the monk life, where you sort of slowly transition out. It also, by inherent dependencies of life, for example, if you choose, which probably 70-80% of people do choose, which is to have a romantic relationship, to have a kid, that also puts more it makes more dependencies on you, which essentially means that if, let's say, you do choose that way of life between 30 and 50 till your kid grows to a much later phase in life, you're sort of stuck in one place, so you can't live a bohemian life, or it just becomes more impractical. So there are certain age related reasons as well as certain general societal reasons why there is particular patterns easier to live the 20s to 30s in bohemian, but there are people who are doing the missionary life in their 20s to 30s too, right? So I think there's no one right answer. It is what you choose. That's the whole point of one life theory. It is what you choose. These are sort of observed patterns, doesn't mean anything in terms of what you choose. I'm going to quickly see the responses on the poll till now, and let's see where the happiness index of this gang is. It's only 20 people, but still worthwhile to see the trend line. Okay, so what I'm hearing, and it's so evenly distributed. Um, there's only, I'm not projecting this, but let me just tell you this: 20% of people who are uh, very happy. Approximately 45% of people are moderately happy, and approximately 35% of people are not very happy. Okay, and this is sort of the bell curve at some level, and pretty predictable. And this is precisely what we are trying to change at One Life Theory. Can we move more and more people towards at least a 7, 8, 9, 10 rather than 6 or lesser? In terms of aspects of life, which is the most, for those on which is the one that you're happiest about, the answers, 25% have said on health and on fun. Work and relationships are the least, which is not so great in terms of for all of you, but it is good for us as One Life Theory as an institution, because that's precisely the two aspects where we can change the most. Not on fun and health some future point in time, but not right now. In terms of which aspect of your life are you least happy about, again, that obviously reflects very similarly. People are least happy about relationship, right? Having gone through a broken relationship and having found love again, I think there will be a bunch of content that Tara and me will put out on that aspect of life. Work and fun come a second. Actually, all of the three are equal, around 15% each. Work fun, and none is actually around 10%, right? I am happy in all things. So that's good to hear. So that's the trend line. We have 3 more minutes. So I'm going to request all of you that if I can extend by 10 more minutes, just so that we cover all the materials. So we will probably end at 5:10. So if you have something hard stop at 5, please do log off. But another 15 minutes will really help us to get feedback. So there is one more feedback form which I would love for all of you to fill. So let me project back the deck, and this is good to see, right, in terms of what are the key areas. And it's a very short sample set, but I don't see the trends being too different even in a bigger sample. Let me project the deck back. I will address the rest of the chat soon, so that I want to cover the deck itself. Okay, so steps 5, 6, 7, right? And as I said, I'm not going to spend too much time here. The moment you have your one life score, the idea is that for this chapter of life, and you can divide entire life into chapters of 3 to 5 years. The idea is step 5 is you write out what your ideal 100-word story for this chapter is, right? If you're looking at the end of this chapter, you're almost writing a press article on how you want this chapter to turn out. I should have accomplished this. I should have been that. I should have fixed this. This is what my chapter should look like. A chapter could be 5 to 10 years also, but a more pragmatic chapter duration would be 3 to 5 years. Along with the chapter outcomes in step 5 comes out the key three outcomes that you want, right? It could be on, okay, on self, I want this to be done. On social, I want this to be done. And there needs to be some clear prioritization. For example, if your anchor is service, you should call out that in service, you're doing this. If your second priority is what you need to fix is self, you will call out that in self, you will do this. And so in social, you can't have 12 goals. You should have a top 3 goals here. Step number 6 is the moment you write out your chapter outcomes, you have to make sure that the environment you're living in every day is set towards winning on that chapter, which means that you have to make certain one time decisions. You're either in a wrong job, you're in a wrong relationship, you're in the wrong city, your health is broken. So there's a variety of one time decisions and things which you need to really fix if something is really broken. After the one time decisions, you will put, along with setting the environment, put in place a process, put in place a key set of values, put in place the physical environment around which you will actually do your day to day life. Step 7 is to make sure that the moment you have chapter outcomes and your environment, you prioritize. So you have what are your priorities, all the way from your quarterly priorities to your weekly priorities to your daily plan. If you remember what I talked about in the 9 tenets, I said one important thing, which is what you're doing at the current moment with full love is the only thing that's important, right? And the point of the 7 step framework, with all of what this exercise is to make sure that what you're doing today, this particular time or this particular hour in your calendar, across any aspect of life, whether that's health, relationship, work, or fun, is really what you intended to do, what you wanted to do in the first place without any regrets, what you really are meant to do, right? Which is why this framework sort of marries your past, your present, as well as the foundational tenets to make sure that you're living your everyday life, every hour of your every week life in a way that you're actually living to your fullest, right? And that's what steps 5, 6, 7 do. As I said, I don't have time today to go deeper into it. So this is really what the framework is, and I'm going to, sort of pause and get feedback. And I would love, this is not something that I'm going to share live right now, but I would actually love for all of you to give feedback. This is something that I would want right now. I'm going to take a 2 minute pause so that you give this feedback. Otherwise, it's very difficult to get the real time feedback from you. So do please, I'm going to talk about what is in the future. So I think we will end in the next 3, 4 minutes. I'm going to talk what is in the future for One Life Theory and would love to hear, what you think of that. Waiting for you to fill feedback. Let me look at the chat window. Yeah, I think pretty much all of the things said in the chat are extremely valuable, and that's so true. Okay, where are we on the feedback? Feedback will take 5 minutes, so please do give that. Another 2 minutes for feedback. I can see 6 responses. Across 10 responses, there are 13 left. The others will fill it later. Okay, three more last minute. Okay, we're almost there. Whoever is yet to finish, do that. Uh, so I'm gonna just, there are a couple of more slides to cover. That's pretty much it. We are coming to the fag end of the events. Let me just project. Okay. Okay, thank you for all the feedback. I've not looked at the feedback, but certainly, the idea is over the next month, as we do this 3, 4 times, just the free one, as we move towards the more involved ones, we just incorporate a lot of this feedback. Okay, so what's up next, right? We will, this is the 1 hour intro event, and what I've written in these three, and these three are the more consistent standard ones, which is this will also evolve into a 2 hour individual coaching as well as a 4 hour group workshop. Both of this will be anchored by Tara, who's on the call. Uh, Tara is also anchoring for us all the content and social media. This will also morph into a bunch of online assessments and education and courses around specific aspects. For example, the personality test in itself could be an assessment along with some content around it. Similar for this entire 7 step process. So the idea is to move towards more and more of this becoming digital. And the end state of something like this is obviously some kind of a product which can intervene and make the behavior change more consistent, right? That's going to happen with time. And of course, that's sort of the really long term view of it. What we are starting next quarter specifically is the workshop and the individual coaching, as well as, so we are working. So whoever is on this forum, as well as people for your own companies, if you think that there is something here that might be useful, happy, please, I'll share some of the contact details. Do mail us. In terms of content, social media is the one that we'll consistently do. So I will be starting season 3, which will go deeper into these 20 micro aspects that I talked about, right? So each of those, the mind strength, the physical, internal, physical, external, relationship, compatibility, all of that, I will do one episode on each of those 20 aspects. That's the third season of the podcast, starting actually Monday. In terms of, obviously, in depth across all of these 4 different aspects is the next level of things. We start with these two more horizontal stuff and then go into something more in depth across those 4 aspects of life. As I said, the blue and the red is the big focus areas for us immediately in terms of my own personal strength, as well as what we have gone through in life in terms of on the relationship and finding love again. Of course, on the health as well as in the fun aspects, there'll be more engagement, but it'll be more a sub part of what we do throughout. The last thing on how and where to reach us, please do email us anything if you want to, either if you have any specific feedback, if you have any specific ideas, thoughts, you think that you can do something for One Life Theory as part of, for your own network, your friends network, your spouse, your office network, your college network, whatever it is, just feel free to mail us at hello@onelifetheory.com. We are, of course, already on Instagram, on YouTube, on Medium. This is sort of old, but the posts are getting updated, as well as on podcasts on both Spotify and Apple. So feel free to use any of those platforms to get the content. And as I said, the idea given, I don't know if you saw my Twitter and LinkedIn today, that I've achieved the unachievable in my life, which is to do 6 days of exercise. So I think if I've done that, nothing is beyond me. So I think we will do content from this week every week, right? That's all I had for today, and really I'll pause here. If there are, I know I went 7 minutes overboard over time, but if there are any questions, happy to address. uh, Also, I would love for you to share this on your social media, in terms of your own social media. If you felt this was useful, the next time we do a session, or just share any of these social handles on your social media, that will be highly appreciated. Thanks in advance for that. And yeah, I'll pause here. If there's anything anyone wants to say, please go ahead. Get yourself on video and audio mute, and then go ahead.
Yeah, hi Rajiv. So actually, I have a question.
I can't hear you.
My name is Ujjwal.
Hey,
Are
Ujjwal.
you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So actually, I have a question. So since you are